Thank you, Shelby. Now we're going to switch gears and move into chemical regulation. I know you guys have been waiting with bated breath to talk about TSCA implementation. Last year we were in a very different place when we were here at the Javits Center talking about TSCA, and we were hopeful and optimistic that Congress would get together and come up with a bill that everybody could agree upon, and we were right. It happened. Congress passed the bill. The President signed it into law on June 22nd, 2016. This happened in a very bipartisan fashion, which almost never happens in DC anymore. So this is a very big achievement for the chemical regulation group out there. The new law has very strict requirements and new implementation deadlines, and just some new requirements that I'll go over briefly. For the first time, EPA is required to review all new chemicals for safety before they enter into commerce, and this has not happened in the past. You'll remember that original TSCA, when it passed in 1976, it grandfathered in all chemicals that were in commerce already. This law requires the agency to go back and do an inventory reset, which means it has to go back and basically check out into the industry and see what's actually being used in commerce. It also gives EPA new authority to regulate existing chemicals in commerce, including those in consumer products, and this is a new area where EPA has had limited authority before, and they have expanded authority in this area. They're called articles under the statute, and this is where toys come in, and this is why we have been so heavily involved with getting TSCA passed and now in the implementation phase. And then finally, the law and any final action that EPA takes will have preemptive effect. Unfortunately, this benefit will not be felt for a few years, but it is coming. So back to that tight timeline for implementation. Within the first 6 months of TSCA passing, which we're already past that timeline, EPA was to designate the first 10 chemicals they will review. They did this. They announced those chemicals in December of 2016. I'll go over those in just a bit. They had to draft a process rule where they would determine the way that they are going to prioritize chemicals as high or low priority for review. This rule came out in January, and comments are due on March 20th. The second process rule that they needed to come out with was a process that they would use to conduct the risk evaluations that they determined for high priority chemicals. And this one also came out in January, and comments are due on March 20th. Then they did the draft rule on inventory reset. Comments are due on March 14th. So within 1 year of enactment, they have to finalize these prioritization and risk evaluation rules that they have proposed back in January. And then they also needed to establish a Science Advisory Committee on Chemicals, the SACC. And I am proud to say that through our advocacy efforts at EPA, we were able to secure our very own Al Kaufman, our Senior Vice President of Technical Affairs, a spot on this panel. There were over 100 people who were nominated for this group, and only 18 survived the final cut, and Al was one of those people. So we are very glad to have an insider in the toy industry sit on this important panel full of academics, government officials. There are animal rights activists, I believe, some NGOs, and then I think that's it. Yeah. So it's a solid group, and we're really proud to have Al sit on that committee. Continuing on the timeline for implementation, within 3.5 years, EPA is supposed to have a minimum of 20 risk evaluations underway at any given time, and 20 low priority designations will have been made. There are a lot of chemicals in commerce, and just to keep the cycle rolling through, once one risk evaluation is complete, a new one needs to begin. So there will always be at least 20 risk evaluations on high priority chemicals going on at any given time. Chemical manufacturers may also nominate chemicals to be reviewed by EPA. They have worked to set up a framework by doing this. It's a little complicated, and I don't think anybody in this room is a chemical manufacturer, but if you'd like to know more about that offline, let me know. Otherwise, chemicals will be selected through the prioritization process, and this is the draft rule that came out in January. Through this rule, they have proposed 4 stages. The first stage is a pre-prioritization stage. It's an undefined period of time where they will throw out chemicals that they intend to prioritize. We have some concerns about this stage in the process. The second stage is the initiation stage, and this has a 90-day comment period that comes with it, and also the initiation period starts the clock. So under TSCA, EPA, under this prioritization timeline, they have no fewer than 9 months to prioritize, but no longer than 1 year. So this initiation stage kicks off that time clock. The next stage is a proposed designation, which is what EPA will come out and throw out that they have determined a chemical as high or low priority. And this comes with another 90-day comment period and then also a final designation. I mentioned earlier that EPA was required to designate the first 10 chemicals for review. They have done that. They're listed here on the screen. I won't embarrass Al by trying to read them. But if you have concerns about these chemicals, or if you use these chemicals regularly in your process, please let me know, because EPA is moving quickly on the scoping documents and on their risk evaluation plan. So please let me know so we can develop a plan to get in touch with EPA to voice our concerns with these 10 chemicals.
Yeah, and if I can interrupt here for a second, we've looked at this list, top line. We believe that the only one of them that might possibly be used in toys is pigment violet 29 as a colorant in plastics. So if any of you are aware of other uses of these chemicals in toys, if you would contact us and let us know, that would be great. Okay.
Okay, so moving on to the risk evaluation process. Once EPA has determined a chemical as high priority, there is a preemptive pause that comes into place. And during this pause and during the risk evaluation stage, high priority chemicals, states may not take action on these chemicals. However, there's always a but. However, states can petition EPA to continue to act during this preemption pause period. But the good news is, at the end of the risk evaluation, any final determination made by EPA will have preemptive effect. So this is the pot at the end of the rainbow that we're all waiting for, is this final action made by EPA after conducting a risk evaluation. Again, last year we talked about some things that TSCA will not do. They're listed on this slide. TSCA does not preempt states from requiring reporting of chemicals. TSCA does not preempt state programs that were on the books before August 1st, 2015. And those include California's Green Chemistry, California's Prop 65, Maine, Minnesota, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington state chemical programs. So those programs that are on the books already will continue. It does prevent bans from happening in the future, so that's something that we will try and advocate for in DC. But we are keeping watch on EPA as they move through this implementation process. It's tricky, and they're doing a lot of things, and they're hammering out a lot of rulemakings right now. There's new leadership that will be coming to EPA. Scott Pruitt was just confirmed as the administrator of EPA on Friday, so he will be at the agency governing this. He has already stated publicly his support of the TSCA program, so we're optimistic that he maintains the schedule and maintains implementation of this very important law. I'll take a few questions if anybody has anything.
Thank you very much, and I'm Dr. Park on MTS. And Washington State has a reporting regulation for the CHCC, There's no conflict with the TSCA, but starting July 1 of 2017, they will ban the product that contain 5 fire retardant product. Does it have anything with the TSCA conflict?
I believe the Washington State was implemented and in place before TSCA passed, so it will not be preempted. It was grandfathered in.
Yeah, but that is on the reporting baseline. But this new regulation is banning the sale of the product.
Jen, do you have a,
Yeah, the new flame retardant restrictions were also passed prior to TSCA being passed. But we will talk more about that in just a minute.
it's a great segue.
Autumn, I might have missed it, but what is the deadline for the comments for the first 10 chemicals?
They are rolling throughout, and I believe each chemical has its own docket. And I think the dates start March 14th, I think. Is that when they start rolling out?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Martha Maripes with Wiley Ryan, and I've
She's
been
our esteemed TSCA counsel.
working with Autumn and TIA on TSCA implementation. So the question prior to this was, is the Washington State ban on flame retardants still going into effect? And if it was passed before the June 22nd, 2016 date, then yes, it still is effective. What we're hoping with some of these laws is where these states will propose bans on chemicals now going forward, that eventually if EPA takes up those chemicals, that the EPA action will be preemptive at the end. But in terms of the first 10 chemicals, EPA right now has the docket, a docket open on their EPA website for each of those 10 chemicals. And it's really critical for everybody in this room to know that the purpose of having that docket open right now is to gather information on use. Autumn and I went to a meeting on February 14 with EPA. It was a public meeting where they were gathering information on use, and your area of the consumer products did come up a little bit. The question is, when does that docket close? And so EPA is said they are going to close the docket for gathering information on use on March 15. We are going to encourage EPA to keep that docket open because really we just found out last week that they're going to close it, and it's a very short period of time for industry to respond. But following that, EPA will propose the scope of the risk assessments by June. That's why they want to keep on a schedule. And so there will be another opportunity to comment again in June.
Thanks, Martha. Any other shot for questions? Okay, great. I'll turn it over to Jen.